All right, Liam, dude, nice to get as close to real life as we're going to get in this in our current climate, especially because you're in Canada.
Yeah, no, I can't cross any borders at the moment. That's for sure. Yeah,
Well, if you go to
but as
Mexico,
soon
you
as
can
I
come
can,
right across.
or I should say, yeah, I should say if I can, I'll definitely be down that way soon. I want to do a road trip across America again. It's been or sorry, not again, but a road trip across America. I've been to like a bunch of different corners of America, but never like done an actual trip through.
And
I want to do like down and around. Yeah.
driving through the states is a really really fun. Yeah, there's some real, especially out west. It's really gorgeous. Like Utah is
Yeah.
underrated for as weird and backwards. You drive through there in the rock formations. It is a really impressive state. I'm partial to mountains, more so than the beach, but like that coastline in California, like driving the PCH is such a beautiful drive. It like never gets old. It's so, and it depends on what seasons too. Like which depends on when you want to go.
Yeah, like West Coast Canada is very similar to West Coast West Coast America for that. But like, yeah, the mountain ranges, all that kind of stuff. Even West Coast Canada, I haven't been out there since like grade 7, 8. It's been a while. But yeah, no, definitely want to make my way back. I got to yeah, I definitely have to check out Texas, New Orleans. I don't want to get roasted. I got roasted for saying New Orleans. Yeah, yeah. I was like, that's a weird thing to get upset about.
Yeah, people get up in arms.
Yeah, New Orleans, Texas, Nevada. Those are like those three, and then just kind of hit the side states and do a big circle as I go. But
Yeah, that'd be fun, man. As you being freelancing, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to New Orleans when I was I was probably 7 or 8, and my dad taught me how to say it like a Cajun. It's like Nolans. So
Nolans?
I was cruising around as a little white kid. It's like you're 7 years old saying Nolans.
Wait, are Louisianans just like the equivalent of uh new the East Coast Canadians? It's like the trailer park. Like, have Americans
Letterkenny?
ever heard of Trailer Park Boys?
I've heard of Trailer Park
Okay,
Boys.
Letterkenny's, yeah. Letterkenny's a little bit more like Ontario, so where I'm from, like it makes fun of like Ontario, like farmers, like kind of like that group growing up. Oh man, that's a very common stereotype here for sure. Like the Letterkenny guys I know a bunch of people that are exactly like that.
That's what's great about Letterkenny is it seems accurate. Because that seems like Texas
Oh yeah.
guys. Texas and Ontario, I think, are
Oh,
very
okay.
similar.
Just no hockey, no
Yeah, no, it's football instead of hockey. That's pretty. That's you sub
Okay,
it in, and
football
you get
instead of hockey.
and it gets colder up there. But yeah, it's wild, man. Those Canadian stereotypes are super funny. But my experience with Canada was like Toronto and Banff. So I've only seen like amazing part. I mean, when I went to Toronto, I was like, this is like a way cleaner version of New York. And I think New York is a pile of trash that smells like piss and is like overcrowded and loud. But if you go to Toronto, it's like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. And then Banff is, of course, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But it seems like you guys have lost your fucking minds. And I don't know what's
Yeah,
going on
dude.
up there. It seems like it's like Australia to the north at this point. And those are two of my favorite places I've always wanted to go to. I almost moved to Australia when I was like 18 years old to work on a fishing boat. Like I was just gonna go, wild and just go do something weird. And experience with Canada, like I've really had a lot of like love for these places. And then all of a sudden you end up realizing that, hey, maybe they should have kept their guns. I don't know what else to tell you. Like this is weird, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's very strange what's happening. Although we do have our own little Florida of the North, Saskatchewan, out in the middle of fucking nowhere with nobody living in it. Their leader is saying that yeah, he's not going to enact any further restrictions for Omicron and stuff, which is great. But unfortunately, it's not as a desirable place to live in as Florida. So I don't think too many Canadians are going to be all of a sudden immigrating to the middle of the prairies.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that you guys. Nice to hear you have a Ron DeSantis of Canada. What are people feeling up there? Because of course, I have a confirmation bias of people that reach out to me from Canada. They're like, man, this is fucked. This is crazy. But then you hear people from Australia kind of defending the situation, and Americans are Americans, right? We have this. We value this individualism that's kind of a part of our culture. And we also like to project that on the rest of the world, even when it doesn't fit at all. We saw that in the Middle East for 20 years. It brings about its fair share of like fuckery. But I look at that and I try to like say, okay, I don't like, for example, with what's going on with Ukraine, that's kind of a weird segue, but I looked at it and I'm like, well, my first question is not what is wrong with Russia, Vladimir Putin's a dictator, all this other stuff. I'm like, what do people in Ukraine want? Like, do they want to be annexed by the Russians? How many of them can they vote on it? Like, that's what I think first. So when I look at Canada and Australia, especially, I'm like, what do people want there?
I just want to, have you seen Winter, just before I forget, have you seen Winter on Fire on Netflix?
No.
Fucking fantastic documentary. Go, it's about the Ukraine protests in 2016, where they were essentially, the Ukrainian government said that they didn't put through a bill to bring free trade to Ukraine. And they had promised the citizens they would, and then when they didn't, the citizens started protesting, and it was all peaceful and stuff. But then the cops, once the protest got big enough, the cops just kind of came in and started fucking shit up, and it turned out pretty much into a full-on war. And it's fucking nuts, and it's just it's just boots on the ground footage, and like you're watching citizens get shot by the cops and stuff, and it's fucking crazy. But it's like war zone footage of a Ukrainian protest and it's wild. But yeah, definitely. Let's just say they don't want to be annexed by Russia.
Yeah, I mean, but then Russia moved a lot of people into different parts of the country, so there's a lot of Russian nationalism there. It's a weird deal. And I don't, in the United States, it's like we're not going to expand NATO any further east, but here we are. So the United States kind of reneged on its whole situation. But long story, or long way around to get back to like what do Canadians feel right now? Like what percentage? I can say like probably 35% of Americans right now are just like adamantly opposed to what's going on. Right. And I'd say probably 70% are just over it. But I don't know what's going on north of the border. Right. I know the trucker thing is basically a media blackout, and that's a huge deal. But other than that, I don't know much.
And any coverage it is getting, they're saying that they're protesting road conditions and unsafe. Like, who the fuck protests road conditions? Like, what? You expect the government to be like, okay, we are going to make it stop snowing? Like, unless we're going to believe that that Jews actually do control the weather, like, this is impossible. So it's like
the space lasers, bro.
Let's not go there.
Lasers.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's hard to say. At the beginning of the pandemic, obviously, I don't know what thoughts were like in Canada, but even I was on board with all the mandates off the hop. I was just like, yeah, like we have no fucking idea what this thing is. Like, yeah, let's take all the necessary precautions. I mean, at that time, I was looking at the footage rolling out of Italy and stuff, and like I actually had had a friend in Italy, and they were like, yeah, dude, this is like fucking crazy. That's when they were like essentially bringing in military convoys to take out all the old people who had passed away. And so I was looking at that going like, oh, fuck. And then like most of the people that got fed up with it, it was around that like 3 or 4 months range when we started getting data and just going like, okay, this isn't, we're going a little bit insane. And then on this third lockdown, when they enacted lockdowns again, that's when I felt the general shift in public perception of what's going on. And even it's at the point now where like somebody in my family was a nurse for 20 plus years. And she has even mentioned, she was on board with everything off the hop. And even she's starting to say, like, this isn't adding up. Like it took her a long time to come around, but even she's turning around on it. So general consensus, I'd say Canadians are not too chill about what's happening. I think it's just a lot more of being afraid to oppose it. So it's like, I'm just going to sit here quietly and feel uncomfortable about it all, but I'm not yet ready to speak up. Where I feel like in America, maybe like people are a little bit more willing to just kind of scream freedom. But yeah, we don't really have that counterculture here. That's what is actually very interesting to me about Canada and the States relationship from that point of view, is like we don't have that. Like we just have the very far left culture. Like 4 out of 5 of our political parties, including our Conservative Party, is borderline more left than your Democrats. So it's like we don't have that that Republican culture here to combat any crazy left-wing ideas. I'm not saying that there isn't crazy ideas on that other side as well, but it's like there isn't any balance. So it's like everything just goes that direction. But yeah, no, generally I'd say people aren't too stoked about what's happening at this point. I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense. We're under more like this is the most strict lockdowns we've essentially had. Like we have a fucking vax mandate but nowhere to go with it. Like or like a vax passport, but we can't even go anywhere to use it. Like what?
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
it's
nothing
it
makes
is
sense.
strange, and I think more people are getting just like frustrated and fed up because it's like, dude, you can get the vaccine, you can do what you want, and then it's like, well, now we can't do that again, and it's just outside of the conspiratorial stuff, and I don't think our counterculture does itself any favors. Like, I don't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be someone who really like speaks to the masses. You know what I mean? Or Ted Cruz for that matter. I mean, even
Mhm.
but it's polluted our minds so much that I'm honestly fucking tired of talking about it. Like I don't like
Mhm.
doing. Sometimes I'll do a show and I'm like, this is just all COVID stuff, but it's the only thing that's coming up. Knowing there's like more stuff going on, that to me is more important. But it's where people are at, and when it comes to social media stuff, that's what people want to hear about and want to learn about and want to see, and they want to chime in. But then that creates its own little echo chamber of itself. So it's so hard, and I do my best to like try to not be in this like echo chamber, and that's why I still consider myself like on the left of center, and I am in many things. But the way I get portrayed now is as a right wing alt right extremist, even though I was advocating for single payer healthcare like 2 years ago. I was like an avid Bernie supporter. It's like I'm like, in what world am I on the right? Like that's not a thing. Like I like guns. Like that's what I mean? It's this weird thing, and there's this like strange polarization. And now it's okay for, like someone like Don Lemon to call a third of the country idiots. But then they criticize
Mhm.
Trump for who I didn't like either for the same thing. Like it just doesn't none of this stuff logically adds up. And if you have any kind of like gift of objectivity, you can look and say, like, this is just a strange situation, and someone like me who had a really strong interest in pharmaceutical drugs and corruption and regulatory capture as a 20-year-old, so like 14, 15 years ago, I was looking into this stuff and writing, speeches and papers and things like that in my health and management classes in college about regulatory capture, right? How McDonald's influences the FDA guidelines. Like these are things, and it was more about like fast food and obesity and things like that when I was younger. But the kind of cognitive display is the same, right? Like regulatory capture is regulatory capture. There's a reason the EPA is kind of run by big oil, and there's a reason that the FDA is kind of run by pharmaceutical companies. That's what it is. And of
Mhm.
course, that's under the guise of this kind of like free market lie, which is
Mhm.
kind of plays counter to a free market economy. But noticing that stuff and acknowledging that stuff used to put me on the left. And now, as long as it's anything else besides big pharma, still puts me on the left. But if you're doing it with big pharma now, who was the villain 3 years ago, right? The Sackler family and opioids and all this other stuff. Now, but in this one little piece of our reality, that seems to not exist, or we have to pretend that it doesn't exist anymore. And I don't think that there's
Mhm.
microchips in it. And I hate when people say that shit about, it's like they call me like a conspiracy theorist because I think that, like, well, you think Bill Gates is putting a microchip in you to track you? I'm like, I have an iPhone. Like, this tracks me. I have this with me all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
like I use it to track myself when I'm in the woods.
That's where I go, like and it's funny because I was really worried that when I started talking about this stuff online, I was going to attract like a heavily right wing crowd. But if there has been a crowd that I've attracted, it's been conspiracy theorists, probably, just for speaking out against the mandates. I mean, they'll champion anybody that's willing to talk out about the mandates and stuff. But yeah, like I'll post a video like ripping Biden for like or just roasting Biden for like saying President Harris multiple times over and over again, and then like people will message me and be like, dude, he's a hologram, right? Like he's not even real anymore. Like dude, somebody sent me a picture and was like, look at his ears. His ears are clearly different than 10 years ago. I'm like, have you looked at your grandma's earlobes? Like every fucking old person's earlobes droop. Like, what the fuck kind of evidence is this?
My wife and I have a conspiracy theory, but a theory. Um, what is that? Pretty Little Lies or Liars or something like that. One of those shows that Nicole Kidman's in. Nicole Kidman is a great actress, like Eyes Wide Shut, like iconic, right? But she's gotten a shit ton of
Mhm.
facelifts, and so her ears and the side of her head look different because that's where they pull your skin. So Joe Biden looks different than he used to because he got hair plugs and facelifts. So your ears look different when you have, it's like, that's easily explained away. Like, do you think this guy's a hologram? Same thing. Like I had a vertigo last week. It like put me on my ass for like 3 days. I was really messed up. And so I was like, hey, does anybody know what's going on? And my audience is really good. And it turned out to be an inner ear thing probably, or maybe a cervical spine thing, which makes sense because nerves and brain and vertigo and balance. But I got a lot of these like, well, it's the chemtrails that are spreading aluminum into this air so that they can transmit for the weather control device. And that's why Colorado had 100-mile-an-hour winds last month and the wildfires because of the HARP system. And I was like, I spend time in the backcountry of Colorado, like a lot of time. Okay. I've seen trees that are bigger around than me blown in half. Like high winds are not an unfamiliar thing to the American West. You know what I mean? Neither are fires. Right? Like I would say we'd probably need more fires because I spend a lot of time in the woods, as I've just said, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to burn. Like it's good.
Yeah.
But we stop it from happening. So therefore it builds up and then you have these like tinder boxes. It's like, why cannot the most reasonable thing be the thing you believe? That's the whole thing with the QAnon thing. It was so funny to see the CIA clearly manipulating a large group of people to undermine a movement and like them just falling for it the whole time. I was like,
what happened with the CIA and QAnon?
Well, I mean, that's my theory, right? Is that the whole thing was a psyop. So you bundle in like some truth, which there was some stuff in there that's like undeniably true. There's a lot of questions about 9/11 still floating around that I'm like, this is weird, right? And there's a lot of questions about all kinds of stuff, right? Agenda 2020 or 2030, like the Great Reset. There's a lot of stuff in there, but you bundle that with a bunch of kooky, weird nonsense that makes absolutely no sense, and you discredit all of it, which is classic CIA psyop stuff. And the CIA is really good at that. Like they can sow discourse in a country, present stability in the form of a dictator, and then all of a sudden you have a coup. Easy. It's like they've done it 60 or 70 times. Like that's what the CIA was made to do. So it's like, it's been just turned on us domestically, in my opinion. I think when I see like something happened, I'm like, what are the odds it was the FBI or the CIA? And come to find out, kidnapping the governor of Michigan, FBI. Like more than half the people in the plan were FBI agents.
And at least like at the very least, it's like, maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't orchestrate this thing from ground zero and said like, okay, this is first step, second step, third step, fourth step, maybe 10th step of this plan happening. It's like they caught wind, they had their people in it or whatever. And it's like, all right, let's let it happen. We'll bust it at the last possible moment so it looks the best and we get a budget raise for next year. Like that's the low end of the stick. I mean, the worse end is like they're doing it on purpose. But it's like, these things aren't out of the question. I mean, like to me, what's crazy is when people completely write those concepts off. And it's like we look through history. You can pick up any book in history, or sorry, any book talking about governments in history, and whether they were on the good side or the bad side, no matter what, they were engaging in like propaganda. They were engaging in psyop techniques. Like I mean, even the Canadian military just admitted that they viewed the pandemic as an opportunity to test propaganda techniques, aka psyops, on Canadian citizens. And it's like, they just openly admit this stuff, and it's like, we're crazy for thinking about this, but where people go too far with it, they start tossing stuff in there. Yeah, like you're saying. And it is kind of one of those important things to be like, all right, just because some stuff is a conspiracy doesn't mean all of it is.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the earth is flat.
Even something like 5G, I'm like, okay, I can buy into the fact that this has all these negative health benefits. I'm not buying into the fact they're doing it for that reason. I'm not buying into the fact that they're putting these things up to create these issues. I mean, we know this. Like even stuff like Bluetooth headphones aren't good for you. Like having this electromagnetic current literally run through your brain. It's like this thing, they aren't good. But like, okay, are they being done to kill us, or are they turning a blind eye to bad side effects to boost their products? It's like, that's probably. I mean, we know that that's what happens in the pharmaceutical world. We know that's what happens in the food industries. It's like I don't buy this whole like they're doing it on purpose thing. I just think it's bad shit comes up and they just try to play it like it's not.
Yeah, which is the most logical explanation. And sometimes the least logical explanation is the right one, but most of the time, like Occam's razor, right? Like this is just where we're at. And it's really strange to me, but I have fun playing with it. That's the thing is like, I love Alex Jones. And that's with the censorship thing, right? Like, I don't think Alex Jones is right about majority of things he says, but every now and then he'll bring up an article that I'm like, ooh, I should go read that. And then I make my own mind up. But I don't sit here and be like, well, Alex Jones is right about everything. And especially when he's like, they're demons and the globalists and whatever Alex Jones is doing. But it's entertaining to watch. And then look at this now, right? Like it was like, oh, well, it's just Alex Jones, right? It's getting censored off YouTube and God knows what, all the platforms, everything. It's just him. And then, oh, well, it's just him and Milo Yiannopoulos, which Milo being off of whatever, he's just an interesting, weird guy, but now he's irrelevant. Like it worked, right? Alex still has InfoWars and Band.video and these other things, but whatever. But then it keeps going.
Yeah, Alex
it just
Jones
keeps
isn't
going
anywhere.
Yeah, Alex Jones is there till he's gonna scream it out till the end. But now it's like, okay, well now you've got Neil Young, this fucking guy, being like, you have to choose between me and Joe Rogan on Spotify. And Spotify's like, okay, that's an easy choice. Later, dude. Like, you probably get what 100,000 streams a month.
Yeah, I love that he thought that was a good ultimatum.
It's one of the easiest. It was like, that's fine, I guess. Like, whatever, leave then. Okay, it's not like you're Taylor Swift. If Taylor Swift said that, then we might have a conversation. You know what I mean? Like, that might be one of the only people on Spotify that gets the amount of streams that Rogan does.
Yeah, and I mean, all of Young's listeners are going to perish in the next 15 years. So it's like, yeah, or you have Rogan, who is literally quadrupling the next highest media ratings. It's like, yeah, Spotify's not letting that guy go anytime soon.
It was 11 times the primetime views of CNN primetime. They were like 800,000 and he's at 11 million. Wow. But then you get like Robert Malone and those episodes, 40 million listens.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, he's crushing them. And it's like, I guess this is where I get where people start on the other, on say the pro corporate media side, where it's just like, oh, like he shouldn't be having these people on there, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, people want to listen to what these people have to say. So either give them the voice on your program and combat them with your good ideas, or let them talk on this other platform. But you can't just try to silence everybody's opinion that isn't yours. And I mean, even somebody today sent me a clip of Jordan Peterson, talking about climate change. I guess I haven't listened to the full episode yet that he just did on Rogan, but he essentially said climate change, the climate change crowd has a problem because climate is everything. They say it's like this big problem we need to solve. Climate is everything. Like, how are we going to solve that? While you're taking these very limited approaches to measuring what you claim to be a problem, but it's everything. And he sent me that and was trying to say, like, don't try to, I don't want to hear any more defense of this guy in the future or something like that, like something of that notion. And I was like, essentially all he's saying here is that they're not going to succeed in their plan because they're trying to paint a big picture looking through a keyhole. And it's like, that shouldn't be a controversial statement. Like, he's not, the rest of it, like, I don't know what the fuck is happening with the climate. I'm not, dude, I hardly know what's going on in my life, like, let alone what's going on with the world's weather. So like, I have no fucking pull in that, but I really don't like this whole, like, I mean, not even the climate aspect, but these topics. I mean, it's anything. It's climate. It's vaccines. It's mask mandates. It's what they're teaching in schools. It becomes like a religion of sorts. And as soon as you start asking questions about, like, you're questioning the faith, and it's just like, at that point, as soon as you raise a question, you're become a Satanist, and you're like, this is like religious shit. Like, what the fuck's happening here? Where you can't even critique the way that people are going about trying to solve a problem. It's like, not even saying that problem doesn't exist. You're just saying the way you're trying to deal with that isn't going to work. It's like, well, what the fuck? Like, how is that a crazy, like, radical idea?
That's not saying they don't care, right? That's a totally different thing. Like, I get frustrated with the climate change stuff too. And I brought this up. It's like, I have more issues with plastic pollution than I do with climate change. And I feel like if you focus on plastic pollution first, right? Let's solve that problem first. It's a huge problem that also correlates with climate change, right? And it has a lot of the same inputs, but you can see plastic pollution. right? We can take a drone and fly it over the ocean and look at those big floating, like basically like clouds in the water of single-use plastic. And it's a solvable problem.
Yeah.
It's a very solvable problem because we know that glass and paper don't have the same environmental impacts. And they're in aluminum, for example, is infinitely recyclable. So instead of having bottles of water, put that shit in a can like Liquid Death does. I don't know if you've seen Liquid Death,
Yeah.
but it's like death to thirst and like death to single-use plastic, and all their stuff is in like it's
Oh, I
water
always
out of a
thought those
can.
were iced coffees.
No, it's water.
Oh, crazy.
Once you realize it's water, it changes everything. I thought it was an energy drink for a long time, and I started drinking them. And it's the only water that's ever knocked off Topo Chico in my life. Like I mostly just drink Liquid Death when I drink like sparkling water now. But I love that. And then and that started a trend where now more companies are putting their water in a can, which makes so much more sense, right? And of course, they're going to be used for like large scale single use plastic and multi use plastic. That plastics aren't going away. But there's this things like, hey, you know what? We're just going to change the market incentives here via government. And I think it's a role of government to do that and be like, there's going to be a single use plastic tax that's going to make it actually less affordable. So we're going to change your market incentives, because the only reason it happens now is because the oil and gas interest, they make plastics out of shitty oil, like the shitty oil that Trudeau is trying to get to come through the United States in that fucking pipeline that was going to create 50 jobs that everybody got up in arms about, right? That shitty plastic that was basically just going to go to Texas and then go to China to make plastic. That whole thing, which growing up in the oil and gas industry, that whole controversy pissed me off so much. I'm like, you guys are all retarded. I'm tired of all of you. Shut up. No one knows what the fuck they're talking about.
In what sense did you grow up in the oil industry?
My granddad grew up, he started working in the oil industry when he was 16, and he worked on a pulling rig, and then he started running a pulling rig. Then he bought a pulling rig. Then he started buying production, like one of those, like started from the bottom, now we hear stories. He only got a 7th grade education and became a millionaire. So like it was one of those deals, but not like crazy money, but we had, when oil was $150 a barrel, it doesn't really matter. Like if you're, we had wells doing like 3 or 4 barrels a day, but that's like $1,000 a day. You know what I mean? It was crazy. So I worked with him growing up. We drilled a few wells. So I just like learned a lot about that. But he was my go-to kind of resource for like, hey, what do you think about this pipeline and this oil? He was like, the United States has enough oil to be energy independent. We have to frack it. And fracking, not all fracking is created equal. There's shallow fracking, deep fracking, horizontal fracking, vertical fracking, and everybody wants to make it a simple thing.
This is where I need guys like you, because I just deal with the bullshit. I'm like, as far as like the actual strategic stuff, I'm like, it's not that I don't care. I find it very interesting. I do actually find it very interesting. But so like, what is your take on energy moving forward? Because I mean, I have zero fucking clue about any of this kind of stuff as far as like a practical sense. I mean, I know the conversation that's happening, but the practicality of those options, I have zero clue. But it's like, I hear things like being like, okay, why aren't we moving towards nuclear energy? That is just kind of like this whole stigma around it because, well, the word nuclear is dirty because of the nuclear bomb. That's a big thing. And
Chernobyl, like Chernobyl was a big part of that too.
Chernobyl. But I mean, even Chernobyl, like that was 100% from like shitty. That is actually a scenario. Like I've looked into a decent amount just because I'm obsessed with the Soviet Union, but it's like that they cut corners in every safety measure while they were building Chernobyl. Like that wasn't a perfect nuclear plant that all of a sudden had this random issue that couldn't have been foreseen coming. It's like, no, the person in the control room was going against all of his staffers' suggestions, being like, no, this isn't the right time to pull a safety protocol. And then also like, that's what it was. They put graphite tips at the end of the control rods, so whenever a nuclear reactor is essentially going crazy and starting to get to that point where it would become a problem and blow up, they throw these control rods in, which essentially neutralizes the power. And they used graphite at the tips of them to save a few bucks. And that graphite acts as a detonator once you to an unstable nuclear core. So it's like, as soon as they put the control rods to essentially shut this thing down, they actually detonated a nuclear bomb, essentially. So it's like, these aren't issues with the process of nuclear power per se. It's about very shitty implementation. And actually there was a very cool, I'm very into like this like sleep science stuff and just how important it is. And there was an interesting article I was reading talking about how uh, a lot. I think it was like somewhere over 70% of the people working at Chernobyl were extremely sleep deprived. You'd have to fact check me on that exact number, but sleep deprivation was definitely playing a part in Chernobyl. Like these guys were working like crazy hours, and of course you're not going to make good decisions when you're deprived of sleep. It's like essentially like being drunk.
In those
So
situations too, it's kind of like the Malaysian Airlines flight, or well, it was some flight, but it was like the culture there is like you don't question authority. So whatever the boss says kind of goes, and that's a big part of it too. I think the HBO series
definitely
did a
in
really
the Soviet
good job.
Union, that was definitely a thing.
Exactly. So it's like one, you don't have a capitalist system running for like the best products in a competitive market, which is a downfall of capitalism or communism, excuse me, obviously. And then but also that's the same thing as being like, well, Model Ts weren't that safe, so I'm just not going to drive a car anymore. Or my cell phone my battery used to die on my Nokia brick phone in 3 hours. So that means cell phones are stupid. It's like, dude, we've come a long way. That was a long time ago. And there's places here, like I think places like Utah would be a good spot to put one, like out in the middle of fucking nowhere, like past Moab out there, like in, where it's like if something does go wrong, you've got protocols for that. I think there's a lot of learning that has to be done from all of that. But with energy in general, so nuclear, I think is a good idea. And this is what puts me like libertarians like never shut up about nuclear. But I think it's great. It's huge. I think that electric cars are going to be a big part of it. I don't foresee any country going full electric by 2030. I think that's incredibly naive. But what you're seeing now, and this is one of the reasons I love Tesla, is because they're pushing the envelope, right? And now it's like, okay, now we think about fuel economy, right? So when I was growing up, I wanted a V8 and I would get like 12 miles to the gallon on a regular basis in my trucks. Like I wanted a big V8. I wanted it to be loud and now, but I'm not a fucking 16-year-old anymore. So now as I'm looking at new
Can
trucks.
You put that into liters for me?
I can't actually.
No, I'm just kidding. Continue. I'm just kidding.
So it's like you wanted these big block, these big motors. And now, me and my friends are like, we're having like pissing contests on who gets the best gas mileage, right? So I want to get rid of my 4Runner that I have that gets 16 average. And I want to buy a full-size GMC truck that I'm going to run on 35-inch tires, right? So I don't know how, 305s in y'all's world. Right, so a lifted gigantic truck, and it's going to get 35.
You know what's actually weird? We use inches. We like whenever we talk about those kind of dimensions, we use inches. Like we don't talk. It's so weird. We use inches as far as like measurements, but then we go to like nobody even really here talks in meters. Like nobody would say that's 600 meters away. It's like no, that's like nobody's using that. And then any other ones? No, I think those are the only ones where we can contradict ourselves in measurements. But yeah, no, it is weird. But anyways, you guys are backwards on it all. We
should all be in the metric system, and that's a huge mistake. Let's move on.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
So I think, like for example, the new GMC Sierra and the Chevy Trail Boss, right? These like higher end half-ton full-size trucks, they're putting baby diesels in them. And these diesels are there's guys getting 40 miles a gallon out of a diesel pickup in a full-size truck. That's unheard. That's like Priuses didn't get that good a gas mileage when they came out, right? And now they're more expensive to fix, but they're moving on. Same thing with the new Toyota Tundra. You can get a hybrid, so you get 700 miles out of a tank. You get 25 miles to the gallon. It's a twin turbo V6 with it's a hybrid, so you get a battery backup. Right. But we got to also keep in mind that making batteries isn't clean business either. Right. Like so it's like,
every time one of these cars gets scrapped too, or even like any electronic products, it's like it all ends up in the ocean or in some crazy landfill in a third world country. It's like, that's where to me, when we talk about like all of these global initiatives, and I'm like, it's great. Like, I'm on board if we can fix these problems, but like as soon as I hear like one solution talked about, like just a million problems go off in my mind about just being like, yeah, but like, okay, we switched to batteries, great, but like, okay, what are we gonna do with all our old batteries? Like they're just they're gonna end up exactly where all of this shit is already ending up,
which then leaks chemicals into God knows what, and this whole thing happens. It's a whole fucking mess. I mean, that's the thing is, like, you just gotta be honest, like. The fact, like, electric cars are a win, I think. And I think Tesla did a good job with that and pushed the market forward. Now we're shifting into like, okay, who can make the truck with the best gas mileage, right? The full size truck, which an SUV, same thing. It's going to be all the same, right? Which is a lot of Americans drive those cars, and they do have really atrocious emissions. And when I was growing up, getting 10 miles to the gallon was a pretty standard thing. Now, if you're not getting 20, something's wrong. And I think I think we're moving in the same way that talking about nuclear power plants and like how innovation happens in these like relatively free markets. you're going to see things getting 60, 70, 80 miles to the gallon, right? Or on one tank of 20-gallon tank of gas, you get 1,200 miles out of that on certain cars. Like that's becoming a normal thing. And it's like, well, what kind of car do you need? Do you really need I need a truck. I need a 4-wheel drive truck for what I do. But not everybody needs that, right? So you're going to end up in this situation where it's going to be a combination. In my opinion, it's going to be a combination of electric. They're going to get better at sourcing batteries. There's a company right now that's trying to turn, instead of having to use lithium, they're going to use steel, so they can recycle steel to make batteries, which would be huge. And there's a lot. Of course, I don't understand that much about battery technology. But when I look at it, I think like, all right, like this is probably where it's going to go. You're going to end up with like much more efficient vehicles. And I think that's a good move. And that we have the technology to do it, right? Like with the new turbo technology, with the new diesel technology, it's all happening. But I think it's going to be a combination of both and move us in the right direction. But at the end of the day, the military industrial complex pollutes more than the entire population of the country. So unless that shit changes, what the fuck are we even talking about? And these people want to be so high-minded.
Like literally destructing things while it's doing it too. It's not even like it's not even like it's causing issues while it's trying to fix them, like maybe the electric batteries the battery market and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, they're literally blowing the world up while creating those emissions. So it's like it's a double negative.
1,000%. So we look at that and it's like there's a lot of moving parts. But again, you've got to be. It's really easy to get emotionally in a camp, and I think that's where people mess up. Right? It's like these celebrities, they do these big things and these big people, and they want to be a part of a big solution to a big problem. But you're missing the forest for the trees because solving problems does happen. I know this is unfortunate, but it does happen via incrementalism oftentimes, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts until you reach a tipping point, and then things change rapidly. And that's how it's going to go with climate change and pollution, these different things. But that's why I get so up in arms about the single-use plastic. I'm like, yeah, you're doing that, but you're carrying around a smart water bottle while you do it, So like, who are you? Like this, I have a plastic cup sitting on my desk for my coffee, and I'm like, I resent myself every time I forget to bring my Yeti cup into the coffee shop, And it's like, but I'm not. Like Whole Foods is one of the biggest plastic polluters, right? So it's like we don't have there's virtue doesn't exist anywhere. Dude, everything you see in Whole Foods, right? I go into Whole Foods, I get so pissed because they have all like watermelon and bananas and pineapples in these like plastic containers. And I'm like, if only fruit came with some kind of weird exo skin that kept it protected and safe that you could peel yourself, you lazy fucking bitch. Like if you buy pineapple in a fucking plastic container, you are a piece of human trash.
Oh, it comes pre-peeled.
Yes.
Pre-peeled in the plastic?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
And I'm like, God damn it, dude. Like it's like simple things like fucking bananas in there. I'm like, why? But everything else that's not in plastic was delivered wrapped in plastic, and a lot of times individually wrapped in plastic. So you're talking about like tons and tons and tons of like unreusable plastic, like this single-use trash. And then you have the plastic companies. This is where regulatory bodies and regulatory capture happens. These fucking plastic producers and the oil and gas companies pay off these recycling, this whole recycling initiative. 80% of that plastic is unrecyclable, but they make you feel like it is. So you throw it in the recycle bin, which then has to be sorted out. It's a fucking lie. It's all smoke and mirrors, but it makes you feel good.
Dude. So City of Toronto, it's like, yeah, we sort all of this. Like we wash our plastic bin containers and all of that stuff. And I don't know if this is still happening, but it definitely was a thing for a long time that the City of Toronto was just combining all of their garbage and recycling once they collected it, and then shipping it off to like a shitty country. Or sorry, like not. I don't mean to be like a shithole.
Yeah, Trump, dude. What are you,
like,
MAGA guy?
Yeah, like
now?
Sorry, like yeah. No, a country that is living in shitty conditions, and then just making them sort it and stuff. And it's just like, what the fuck are we doing here for? Like, again, essentially, like what you're saying is this smoke and mirrors, or like same thing with Canada and oil. It's like, we shut down all of these pipelines, and again, I don't know whether they're good, but I do see on the other end, it's like, okay, so we just go and buy all of it off of China and Saudi Arabia instead of producing it ourselves. And it's like, okay, do you think Saudi Arabia and China are regulating their oil industries that well? It's like, I doubt it. So it's like, what's the best win? Like, what's the best win here? Because it's literally just exporting our carbon footprint at that point, and that doesn't solve anything. Yeah.
And to bring it back around to, and this is what I think really I look at all the politics stuff, and this is because I'm a human behavior like science nerd. People don't know that about me because I was a life coach for years and did all those shit. But it's like I just love that. Even when I was a fitness coach growing up, like my first real job was a strength and conditioning coach and CrossFit coach, and I did that and like severely invested like more money than I needed to spend on like learning. I wanted to achieve like mastery in this understanding of people and movement. And I realized my first year of coaching, I'm like, oh, the fucking sets and reps and like technique stuff, like, yeah, there's stuff to learn, but that's pretty straightforward. Understanding people and why they're there is a big difference, right? Like little things like my 5:30 a.m. CrossFit class, right? Didn't need motivation. They were there to fucking work. And they would show up early and they'd be stretching before I even got there, right? That was way different than my 5 p.m. CrossFit class, right? That was still a full class, 20 some odd people. Those people had just got off a conference call, rolled up, and just want to cut loose a little bit. So it was like just knowing the difference of meeting people where they're at and that kind of stuff was really important to me. And so I started investing heavily in human behavior science. And that's where I spent a lot of my time and what made me a really great CrossFit coach until I burned myself out trying to own a business and become a business owner instead of doing what I should have done. But with this, and to kind of bring Jordan Peterson into this and what I learned from him and that whole process and getting into his stuff later on was understanding that people really, they just want to feel good. At the end of the day, it's not about like, you got to understand that like, if you want to make things happen in your life, it's going to come via sacrifices, right? But the American culture is like, feel good all the time. That's why everybody's fat as fuck, right? Feeling good is easy to commoditize. You were in the United States, and this is one of my biggest criticisms of capitalism. You are a consumer before you are a citizen. Right?
Yeah. That's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing. Yeah. Like you need to consume. That's one of the reasons I don't like capitalism as a pure system, because you are then incentivizing the production of senseless nonsense. Right? Like it's just absolutely, I guess senseless nonsense is redundant, but like senseless bullshit where you just got to make like, we need every Disney character from every movie on a fucking balloon and merchandise and this stuff, even though you're going to come out with the next one next year and these won't be good anymore. And they're going to end up in a secondhand store, or if you're lucky, or probably in the fucking trash when your kids outgrow this bullshit. And it's like, why? Well, like I'm not raising my kids like that.
I think we in the West need to fundamentally rethink our relationship with what we believe is happiness. Like we toss around this like, be happy, like, you know, like, yeah, it's like this concept that you can just not be sad, like be happy all the time, like chase happiness, like the pursuit of happiness. And it's like, what is happiness? Because really what you're telling me happiness is just pleasure. And if you think about pleasure for a long time, you realize that it's not just good. Like, I mean, our happiness is essentially created off of our relationship between pleasure and pain. And I mean, that's where we get our sadness, is from pain. And I mean, our emotional reactions to things are physical. Like we do actually get the same physical reaction to like depression and all that kind of stuff as if you were to or sorry, not depression, but when you feel emotional pain, it activates all the same nervous centers as if you feel physical pain. So when we think about just flushing ourselves with, just tossing pleasure onto ourselves constantly, it's like, well, pleasure isn't always good. Like, okay, like eating a slice of pizza gives me pleasure, but like, should I eat a large pizza every night? Like, no. It's like, okay, well, it's like, if you use your auto blow AI too much, does it feel too good? No, you end up getting fucking depressed. But like, guess what? That first time you do it is very pleasurable. Yeah. But like prolonged exposure to pleasure actually, brings about pain. And with our dopamine systems too, when we're constantly overloading our dopamine systems, it causes us, our minds, to not want to get hooked. Just like you'll form a tolerance level to any sort of any drug that you take. It's the exact same with your pleasure centers, like your dopamine and all that kind of stuff. So if you're constantly giving it to yourself, your mind's just going to start building a tolerance to it, and then it's very fucking hard to get it back. And you're gonna be searching for like quick hits of it, like fucking social media likes and even dude, we can talk about that shit too, because I didn't realize just how much these social media platforms hijack your mind until I started using them about a year ago. Like, I mean, I'd always been on them, but it was like I hadn't really like used them until a year ago. And it's crazy. But yeah, we've literally cheapened happiness to the point where our mind has created a tolerance to it. And it's like, we need to rethink the whole consumer idea about, just just be happy all the time. Just do whatever makes you feel good.
I think it happens with also like derivatives of happiness, and we're getting into like the ethereal. I like this, but like derivative, like virtue.
I'll talk about this shit all day. This is stuff I like more than politics. It's just unfortunately nobody else likes hearing about it.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, this is politics because they're doing the same thing with virtue, right? Virtue signaling, left or right, and that means if you're a congressional, candidate, and you do your ads with a fucking AR-15, that is virtue signaling. I'm sorry to break that to you. That is exactly what that is. Okay? Like, to an extent, this deer behind me on my wall is virtue signaling. This live free or die shit is virtue. It is. I mean, let's just be honest about what it is. And also, like, posting a black square on Instagram at a certain time was virtue signaling, right? And that's all. It's a quick hit of like, I feel good because I did a thing. I did a thing for the greater good. It doesn't matter if it's actually for the greater good or if it makes a fucking difference at all, which 99.9% of the time, it doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference. And if it does, it gets hijacked by people who want the worst for the fucking world. And then it's the same shit. It is the same exact shit. And we were going to talk about, like, I hate using the word woke, but this is what people talk about when they say like wokeism. When I was in personal development stuff, what woke meant was that you were kind of woke to the facade that is what we're talking about, consumerism, cycle of like fake happiness. That's what woke meant. Like, you've done some ayahuasca and you've been, you've eaten a bunch of mushrooms and sat in a dark room for 5 hours, like Terrence McKenna said to do, Yeah. And like you saw, like, oh, I like saw the shit. I saw the like games I was playing. That's what woke meant, 5 years ago. Now woke is a totally different thing, but it influences everything. Like, okay, unpopular opinion. We're going to get into shit that we both like right here. I think this is going to be some fun correlates here. I don't think, and this is going to get me in trouble, right? In reasons you can probably tell me. I don't think Black Panther is that good of a movie. I never watched Captain Marvel because it seemed like a stupid fucking movie. Now, I love a strong female character. I loved Alien. Yeah. Right? I love Sarah Connor and Terminator. Those are fucking bad bitch movies, right? I love representation in movies of all races and different. My wife watched that show, that like period piece about like the kings and queens. I don't remember what it's called. I forget what it's called. It was on Netflix, but it's like it was racially diverse in a way that was unrealistic for the time period, but it was well done and it was really good. It was an incredible show. Okay. And they almost just like didn't address it, which was even better, right? I just watched a few episodes, but I was like, they did a good job of like making this representative in a way that was unrealistic, but made it good anyways, in spite of that. Whereas now it's like, if you are represented, it has to have been good. Like, I think that Black Panther could have been a fucking incredible movie, but they tried to do too many things and make it too many things. You know what I'm saying? And it was like you had the rhinos, right? These like cool rhinos that were armored up and badass. You saw them for like 2 seconds. It was like, what is this? Yeah. Right. And you had this crazy, this crazy kind of combination of like Marvel cinematic, just brilliance and African culture, which was fucking dope. And you took all of that shit and you put it with a shitty narrative structure that makes no fucking sense. And you had the incredible anti-hero. Incredible. And was his name Killmonger? Whatever his name was, I forget.
Killmonger.
But it's like, yeah. And you have this, and you kill him off. He was right. He was right. And then the hero of the movie ends up doing what he wanted him to do the whole time. Why not show a way to make compromise? Because he was actually right. He was fucked over. He was a sympathetic villain, and you killed off. Are you fucking crazy? Like, it just made no sense. It killed me, and it was like, but we're gonna do good. And white people shouldn't go see it on opening night.
This was the point I was going to make about DC and why, when DC movies fail, because there is like the odd good DC movie, but they're very far and few between. But it's like, they don't make their villain sympathetic. Like when you watch Black Panther, you understand Killmonger's motives. You understand deeply why he's doing the things he's doing. You understand what path brought him to do those things. But then you've got something like, say, Justice League, which was a fucking atrocious movie. Zack Snyder cut wasn't actually that bad. It was pretty solid. But it's like, yeah, you've got Steppenwolf, and it's like the whole movie, it's like he's just this dude that looks scary and intimidating, but like he has zero personality, zero character development. Like, you have no idea what's making him want to do the things that he's doing. It's just like, oh, their explanation is like, well, there's evil people in the world, so like they're gonna be here. And it's like, yeah, but what makes that evil person tick? And that's what makes a lot of Marvel movies good. Now, I don't think that I didn't have necessarily any big gripes with Black Panther, but I also didn't think, I think it was like the cultural movement around it kind of blew it up to be like a masterpiece. I mean, the same thing with Shang-Chi. People, yeah, like all of a sudden we're calling it like a top 5 Marvel movie. I was like, you're out of your mind. Like that's these are middle to like maybe top third Marvel movies. Like,
Yeah.
that's where I'll give them.
Which I want to kind of like highlight why we're talking about this though, because I think like Marvel and Disney in particular have a tap on and they do influence culture in many ways. And I think culture influences policy in many ways and just kind of the way people feel about themselves. So I think Marvel movies are actually a great correlate in like which ones held up, which ones didn't make any sense. You know, how are they trying to like capitalize on whatever social movement's happening at the time? Like, and I'll say like, yeah, Black Panther was like great. It was good. Right. But if we can contrast that with like, the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies and what they did was Zendaya in that movie, right? They took MJ from, if you think about the original Peter Parker and MJ, it was like, she's the popular girl, she's out of your league, she's cute, and turned her into this like bait and switch where you think it's this other girl, but then it's actually like the kind of the nerdy girl who's, kind of cool, but kind of quirky and is also kind of like flips him off sometimes. Like just like they made it and it's like, oh, that's like actually a more relatable thing. It's like a more relatable person. It's not a fairy tale. It's like, oh, these are like nerds in debate club or whatever, or like math club or whatever the fuck they were in. And it's like, it made it was like, that's cool. Like that was good representation. And it was like, not that, I don't know. It's just, it's a challenging thing a dynamic, but you look at that and you're like, it can be done so well. But with Black Panther, what gets me so upset is because it had so much potential. Right. Like I think the Tom Holland Spider-Man like did as much as it could do. The villain in the second movie was, but you look at it and it's like, man, you guys blew it. You could have made it a thing. That's what DC, my biggest gripe with DC is like, make them the dark Marvel, make them grimy and rated R and fucked up. Look at what like Deadpool's are fun movies, right? But they're not like great. They're funny. They're fun and funny. Do that. Make rated R superhero movies that aren't for everybody.
Have you ever seen Logan?
Grown-ups. Logan was great. Logan's a good example. Logan and the
Boys. That's what DC should be doing.
Absolutely.
Also, the Boys. The Boys is fucking sick.
It's so great.
I like the Boys, dude. I like the Boys because it's the most like as much as they like kind of exaggerate certain things or like make it like like real crazy. I'm like, if superheroes existed in the world, this is how it would be done. Like they would
be commercialized.
They'd be a market. They'd be commercialized. They'd be like I mean, I don't. Fuck. This is where I'm like, how much do you talk about? And like, what's a spoiler? But it's like, yeah, essentially going on to create their own enemies, just so that they can kind of push and PR move themselves and this and that. And I'm like, this is what would happen if superheroes existed in the real world. So it's like, yeah, that semblance to the real world needs to be there, but somewhere like say Black Panther, I think where, if I'm understanding correctly, like where it seems like it seems like they just took like maybe the cheap route to talk about what was happening in society, like just throwing it in your face. Like even I get that when I watch the scene in Avengers Infinity War when what character is it? Oh yeah, the villain is just like, oh yeah, you can't beat me on your own or whatever. And then one of the Dora Milaje hops in and it's like, she's not alone. And then all of a sudden, like all the women characters come in.
It was so
sorry, no, that was Endgame. That was Endgame.
Yeah, and I was like,
this is like, yeah, this is just like you're doing this so that the crowd stops in the middle of the movie and like all of a sudden it pulls. To me, that's where it's like you're pulling me out of the movie for a minute.
So contrived.
Mm-hmm. So like if it's just fucking thrown in your face, it's like, yeah, all right, I see what you're doing here. You're pandering. But I mean, I think the best movies that are commentary on society are the ones that go like so far with their analogies and their storytelling of it. Like Dune. Dune's a great example.
Yes.
Where Dune is all about imperialism. But it's like, it's done in such a way that you can't tell what countries are supposed to be the villains, which countries are supposed to be the heroes. Like, it's so far brought from reality that you kind of almost don't even understand it's a commentary on reality. But those are the movies that end up sitting there and resonating, and those are the moments that people think about for a long time, because it's like Inception in a sense. Like if you put that kernel of an idea in there where people don't necessarily understand what something means, but then they really have to think about it, and they're like, oh fuck, okay, oh, the spice, oh, it's like, oh, the imperial over, oh, that's the British, okay, cool. Like these native people like trying to protect the spice in like the hills, okay, like, yeah, oh, okay, this is British imperialism in Africa, like in the late 1800s. You're like, okay, I get this. And then it hits. But if it was like, if they were like storming into this foreign world, and it's like they have like something like an African flag in the back, you're like, okay, come on, like this, you're shoving it in my face. Like, let me figure it out, and then that idea will resonate.
Think about the difference in Dune versus Avatar, which Avatar is a beautiful movie, and I hope the sequels are great.
Yeah.
But Avatar is Pocahontas, right? Avatar is Ferngully. And it's so in your face. It's cinematically so impressive, especially for the time. Like I think I got high and watched that like 14 times when I was in college. That's what me and my friends used to do. We had a group house together. But yeah, it was like, it's great. But yeah, there's something to be said for like story writing, and I think a lot of that is gone. Like I think, and some of it, you get glimpses of it every now and then, but it's like being dehydrated and finally getting some water. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where it's like, oh, like that's what it's like. Like that's what it's like to write a really good character, and that's why I love The Americans, and then Ozark's another good one, right? Where like the story, right?
I just started season 4.
Oh, me too. Yeah, we just started the other day. But The Americans is a very similar story. So The Americans follows a couple who are Soviet illegals. So they move them as a married couple to the United States with fake documents. They steal the names of dead kids because they have to get birth certificates through some insiders, and they live as Americans for I think 20 some odd years. And it's a cool story, but it's their story, but it doesn't make like Soviets aren't the bad guys, America's not the good guys, right? The Americans do just as much fucked up, and the American like FBI does just as much fucked up stuff as the Russians do for the most part. It depicts like Russian life at the time, after World War I, especially in World War II, like these crazy experiences where people were just like, things were fucked up, man. And it shows that, but it's not like communism is evil and capitalism is amazing. It was kind of this weird, and it does such an amazing job. And the way that it's like, it just has a kind of an ambiguous ending. I'm not going to spoil anything because I think it's one of those underrated shows that does an amazing job. Has an amazing, the protagonists of the show are the Soviets, right? The wife is a badass, but and this is one of the things that kills me about fucking female superheroes, and it's female just anytime, right? Westworld's a good example of this. They just seems like whenever a female is fighting someone, they're just a fucking stormtrooper. And they just get punched in the face, and it's like a very accommodating stuntman. Whereas like the woman, and it's the girl, dude, it's the chick from Felicity, right? So you gotta think she's she's probably 5'2", 130 pounds. And when she beats men's ass, which she does it with cunning, and she does it with skill, and she does it with speed, but she never overpowers someone, right? Unless she gets a rear naked choke on them or something like that, which I've been rear naked choked by a small female before. Not a joke. I would rather a large man choke me than a small female. That's good. That's a jujitsu like. There's somebody who's good at jiu-jitsu. Yeah, it's not fun. I had that happen, and like the little bones in her arm like went through my throat and like touched my spine. I was like, I've never felt this kind of like choke in my life. But it's like something about that where it's like, it doesn't have to be like, the boys did a good job with this. They kind of mocked that whole thing in Marvel, whereas like they had that girls get it done campaign. You know what I mean? And it was just kind of so over the top and blew it up. And you're like, you need these irreverent shows to kind of blow up these cultural narratives, right? And like hold these drivers of culture to account for their fucking bullshit and like their self-aggrandizing nonsense. Like there's a reason that Captain Marvel barely made an appearance in Endgame, because they made her too powerful. Right? She was like Superman on steroids. And it's like, well, this doesn't even make sense.
Well,
also,
that's kind of a thing in the comics.
I'm sure it is, right? I mean, it
like
makes sense.
she's OP as fuck, like overpowered as fuck. Yeah. But I think where they went wrong with Captain Marvel was just, first of all, I didn't like the casting.
Terrible.
I don't like Brie Larson.
Brie Larson is good at certain things. She's good at, but she is not a superhero. She's just not.
She's amazing at drama. But like even if you watch the press interviews with Brie Larson and the rest of the Avengers cast, like it was like, oh dude, it was so cringy. There was a moment in an interview where like Chris Hemsworth's joking about Thor being more powerful than Captain Marvel, and like she gets like upset about it. Like she starts like going at him, like tossing like backhanded comments at like Chris Hemsworth, not even like participating in the joke anymore. Just like, I was just like, holy shit. Like, so you're watching that, and that's where I'm kind of like, okay, I can see like maybe that's why I'm feeling like this disconnect with her in these scenes. Like you can tell that she's, I mean, there's all these like rumors and like kind of stories from like staff being talked about, like how she was just a nightmare on set, like didn't get along with anybody, was constantly causing problems. But it's like, yeah, no, the casting of those things is so important, and the way that you portray them. And like you were saying with the Americans and the girl, woman from the Soviet Union being like, yeah, she's beating them in ways that women can beat men. Where it's like that, and that's a very big possibility. Like, yeah, where you and I were just saying, like we've both been choked out by girls before. But it's like when you see Brie Larson like sprinting in a scene next to it was a train, yeah, in the Captain Marvel movie. Like she's like flailing about and stuff, and you're like, this isn't how even a normal person runs, let alone one of the strongest superheroes in the world. Like, so it was one of those scenes for me, or one of those castings for me for sure, where I was like, yeah, this whole Captain Marvel thing didn't feel like it was working. But
and that's something that the Black Panther movies did well, was the female casting was like, I think any of the women in that movie besides the little sister could beat my ass. Like, look at that. I'm like, yeah, they were like, and then with the shaved head, like they did a good job with that.
Yeah, the Dora
like,
Milaje.
Yeah, they were badass.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like little bits of that here and there. And I love talking about this stuff because I geek out on it, because you look at, these giant epics like the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones books, where it's like so complicated and so nuanced and so gray. And they always throw in somebody who's like kind of pure and somebody who's kind of evil, and they rotate them in and out. But it's never, you can always understand the character motivations of these like evil people that they just paint as like bad. Like, oh, they're bad. But in, again, like the Tom Holland, the first Spider-Man movie, I forget, Michael Keaton. Great job.
Yeah.
He was
Vulture.
getting fucked over, and he was like, all right, well, we'll just make weapons then. It was like, all right, cool. Like that, I would do that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's like a sympathetic character, and some evil shit, but it's like, it's a slow process. The Wire, I don't know if you've ever seen The Wire, great example of that. You understand how Michael B. Jordan, so yeah, nice little through line there, as a kid, like got into slinging dope because he had like 6 brothers and sisters, and his parents were junkies, and that's the only thing he could do to like make sure they had cereal in the morning, right? It's like, okay, so now you're empathizing with a drug dealer in the early 2000s in Baltimore, right? Where it's like these people have been villainized by Rudy Giuliani and George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, and you get a different look at it from the inside, right? Then you get a look at inside the cops and see how the cops are all fucked up, and the politics and the school system and how the school system's all fucked. And you're like, wow, this is like, if you ever want a breakdown of what real systemic racism is, go watch The Wire. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Right? It is that
Yeah, I think
simple.
I saw the first season way back. Oh, it would have been a while ago. And I do remember really liking it. But for some reason I fell off. But I do remember like the first season being like, oh shit, this is pretty realistic. Like, I don't like when one side is portrayed as like altruistic or like, mistake free of any kind, no matter what the movie is about. But I mean, I think that's even like what like that's what Dostoevsky was famous for, and I'm yet to like dive into his books, but I've more so just I like going into YouTube, finding like old school intellectuals, and then essentially like getting YouTube breakdowns of them, and then being like, okay, now I'll spend time reading this person's book.
1000%.
Like, yeah, everybody talks about. Yeah. So, but like everybody talks about how Dostoevsky was like the goat of that, like essentially like steel manning the person in the, it's like, who is, I mean, Dostoevsky's obviously he's sympathizing with the protagonist throughout the story. That's every writer is kind of doing that, but like, he's really like, yeah, steel manning the people on the antagonists, and like making sure like there isn't holes in the fact as to why they're doing things, or also like kind of shining maybe the protagonist in a bad light, like kind of, and it's like that's what makes a good story. And I think I was actually listening to a podcast with James Cameron and Ridley Scott, and it was very interesting because they were talking about how movies are novels for just modern day, like they're the last frontier of storytellers, essentially. Like, what percentage of people read books? Like, so it's like it's very few, but I think where that's kind of an issue, where now like storytelling has been solely being told by movies, is it's so easy to check out during a movie. Like, you can kind of check out while you're reading a book too, but as soon as you like hit a sentence, you're like, where the fuck am I? You're like, this is not making any sense anymore. But you can kind of just like hop in and out with movies. You can send a text for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then go back, and or you can get lost in the visuals of it and not really be paying attention to what they're saying. And so there's so many opportunities to miss the story being told. But that's like, I just got into reading about like a year ago. I would listen to audiobooks and stuff, but it was the same issue of being able to check out, where just, yeah, a year ago, I finally was like, no, I'm getting myself to start reading. And it's crazy the difference that you pick up. I don't read that much nonfiction, but even if when I do, I'm like, oh, I understand these characters and these stories so much better when I'm reading than I am watching. Or like, at least when I'm watching, I have to go back and watch breakdowns or like Easter egg type videos to very like understand the story. But yeah, I think a lot of people miss out on, yeah, they use movies as, again, just like that pleasure checkout, like just being like, oh, I just want to feel good, I want to go watch a movie. But like, when was the last time you sat down and watched a movie to like actually like impact, like be like, oh fuck, I'm gonna take something away from this and like actually apply it and like actually like live it essentially. And it's like that's what I think is missing in the movies these days. And this is actually my thing with Marvel, is like a lot of people make the right critique that the movies are formulaic and kind of like blueprinted, but the story is this universe. It's from movie to movie. Like, think about movies as episodes of TV shows, and yeah, like each one of those episodes follows a formula, but the story is being told on a large scale, and that story being told is pretty good, like, and pretty accurate to real life. Like, I mean, even when you see like the way that certain like military operations are taking place, like, you know, General Ross like kind of doing some fucking shady ass shit for the military, you're like, oh, all of this takes place. Even the one line, actually, it's at the beginning of Iron Man, where I was like, oh fuck, this is so on point, where the reporter asks her like, oh, did you practice that line in the mirror? But it's where he's talking about how all of the nice things that have come out of Stark Industries, whether it's like the regenerative farming type stuff or the arc reactor, all of that kind of stuff. He's like, that all came by way of military funding, baby. So like, you can sit here and get angry at me, like at the military side of things, but everything you think that I do is good also came by way of a military contract. And it's like this throwaway line in a movie, but you're like, yeah, that's actually what it is. Or even in Eternals, the I don't know if you've seen that one yet. It's one of the new, I think it's the newest Marvel movie, but there's a character in that who's essentially like creating technology and feeding it to humans throughout their evolution. And he says at one point, he's like, one Eternal is being like, why are they always at war, like this and that, like really like upset about the fact that he's watching all these humans be at constant war. And the guy that's in charge of technologically innovating humans as they move is like, oh, this is necessary. Like, this is how they how they improve. Like, every time a war happens, like medical advances happen. So it's like, yeah. And it's like all of these like weird double-edged swords. But if you really pay attention and you start thinking about like certain concepts being talked about in these movies, it's like they're very, very interesting conversations. Or like Civil War is one of my favorite movies. And it's like that whole movie is a narrative on whether the collective needs trump individual rights. It's like Captain America's side is talking about individual rights, and Iron Man's side is the collective need. And it's like, that's a whole movie on it. And both of them, like throughout the whole movie, you're constantly torn as to which one's right. Like, there is no clear cut right side. And you're like, those are where those movies do so good. But yeah, most of the people just, I mean, take the Martin Scorsese critique of them being amusement park rides, and they're not wrong from a visual perspective. But like, yeah, there's very good concepts in these movies that I feel like a lot of people are missing.
Yeah, I think they are. And I think one of the things that, to kind of piggyback on that is just this kind of understanding that people don't like to get uncomfortable, right? And that's, I think, a lot of this, we talk about this virtue and virtue signaling and this kind of outcry, and you can call it social justice warriors or wokeness or whatever you want to call it. It's like, when you look at it, like, go watch Requiem for a Dream, right? By yourself and pay attention, turn your phone off. that movie will fuck you up and have you rethinking things. The Wire, same deal. Like in some of these Scorsese movies, same. It's like they get into your head and like make you rethink the way you view the world. And that's something that novels used to do, or novels or nonfiction books. It's like you can get in and like put yourself there. And one of the beautiful things about books, especially if you don't have like a framework for the universe, is that you really kind of co-create the universe with the author of the book, which is kind of their responsibility to give you the tools to do so. But you like create this universe, and even the people that you see, the things that because you see it all in your mind's eye, you know, you got to kind of co-create that, and you can really put yourself there. Which I don't read a ton of fiction, and if I do, it's usually audiobooks. But even then, if I don't have a framework, like I read the Song of Ice and Fire books after I saw Game of Thrones, so I kind of like envisioned Peter Dinklage as what the hell is his name? Jeez, how am I blowing this? Tyrion Lannister. But yeah, so you have that framework, but I think there's like this adverse relationship with being uncomfortable that comes along with like, I guess maybe even it's American or Western culture, where it's like, we talked about that, like those fast hits of dopamine and this, and then like, it makes me feel better to feel like I'm speaking out against this thing, even though I've not ever acknowledged the unintentional consequences of whatever that may be. Right. And that may be gun rights or abortion or, you know, like Black Lives Matter or this other thing. And it's like, but you don't, it's almost like we don't have the skill set, or we haven't developed that skill set as a culture to be like, okay, but I need to also like zoom out and address the larger consequences of this action, because everything, and this is what I talk about on the show a lot, is whatever you're going to do has unintended consequences, right? Your level of credibility to me correlates with the number of unintended consequences you can find in a thing that you find virtuous. You know, if you find like, okay, so climate change is a good one, right? So we just like, hey, climate change. Well, what are the unintended consequences of what you want to do that you don't want to confront, that will make you a little bit uncomfortable and make you second guess this whole thing, which is why politically homeless became what it is. And now we have thought criminals, but it's like, you got to look at all that stuff, and to look at all that stuff, you can't be on a team. And if you're on team, you know, wokeness, or if you're on team conservative, or if you're on team Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever, or QAnon, it's like now you have an allegiance to that thing. You have an allegiance to that thing that then blinds you from the uncomfortable reality of the fuckery that will ensue after your dream life that you think your utopian, your libertarian, socialist, whatever it is, your utopian vision for the world has consequences. And they're not good ones. There's some good ones and there's some bad ones. That's the way, like communism makes sense on paper. Capitalism has problems. Like like socialism, to a lot of people, when you feel like the wealth gap between the lowest and the highest in this country is ridiculously high, well, the people that are getting fucked are going to want to have socialism because they're better off.
Yeah.
So why would they not? They're looking out for their own self-interest, at least in their imagination, right? And these conservatives, like, so there was this Daily Wire video this girl Brett Cooper did, who I do like. We correspond on Instagram. She's not going to like this video at all. But what she was saying, that she was criticizing Gen Z, right? Which has its fair amount of issues, don't get me wrong. But it's like, yeah, there's this drive within Gen Z to work as little as possible and have as much free time as possible. And I was like, I don't see a problem with that. If you want to live minimally, like there's a reason there's a minimalism push, right? To have like 2 forks and a cot and a bedroom and like I'll spend a lot of time outside. Like if you want to forage through the Whole Foods trash can and find good food and that's how you want to eat, like more power to you, dude. That stuff's going to waste anyways. And a lot of time they throw away good food. Like somebody had like $700 worth of groceries they found that was all fresh in the Whole Foods trash can. I was like, that's weird. But hey, whatever, like more to your own. And it's like these like pro-freedom people are like, yeah, but you need to work 60 hours a week to get to that freedom. And it's like, why? You can live. I was like, I know people who are crazy wealthy, and I know people who live in a fucking van. And sometimes the guy who lives in the van is happier than the wealthy guy. And maybe you don't consider that your American dream, but this motherfucker likes to surf. So like, that's what he does. You know, it's like, it is what it is. So
dude, I'm going the van route.
I believe it.
I want to go the van route.
You could podcast in a van.
Oh, dude. And that's actually my idea, is to be able to like essentially do like Anthony Bourdain, but podcasting. But like more so like cut from like a cultural, like political realm, and like really like get into the like the nitty gritty of certain areas or countries. And like and talk with those people. But like you're saying, like with the whole push of, dude, it is so weird to me where like people want to make it seem like life. What you were saying there with the pro freedom crowd is very like pull your bootstraps up, like put your time in at the corporation for 40 years that doesn't give a fuck about you. You're like just a number on a spreadsheet to them. And that's what life is. And it's like, that's not fucking what life is either. And then on the other end, I go, I sympathize with the ideas on the left more, and I feel like that's why I maybe attack them a little bit more, as I consider myself on that end of things. But it's just, again, it's the proposed solutions to them where I'm like, this is fucking nuts. But it's like, yeah, that easy lifestyle, it's like, okay, but you just have to make sacrifices. Like, guess what? Like, okay, you want to not have somebody down your throat, man, like making you work 45 hours a week, making you work 60 hours a week, pulling overtime and shit, like, then do it yourself. Like, start your own business. It's going to take more time off the hop, but you can definitely switch it. It's sacrificing your immediate, like, the present for the future. But like, you have to, like, you can't want the easy streak, but then expect it to be given to you. So like, that's where I empathize with that freedom crowd, is like, yeah, you can't just expect the government to give you that lifestyle.
Yes.
But on the other end, I'm like, yeah, you should be able to achieve that lifestyle. Like, that's a very desirable lifestyle. Like, but go do it. But like, yeah, this idea that it's going to be created for you, that's where I start losing it.
It's like everybody wants to go to college for free, right? Like, I hear that all the time. I have gotten this like huge debate with this like lefty 25-year-old white chick who was like, if you want to get a liberal arts degree, that should be taken care of. This should be taken care of. And I was like, okay, so if you're got a liberal arts degree or whatever, like, who's going to hire you? Who's going to buy your shit? Like, if the government's paying for everything, then nobody has any fucking money. So it's like, you have no way to like, so you don't understand, the cycle doesn't really make sense. Like, you can't just be given everything. Like, there is a game of sacrifices, regardless of whether you live in a laissez-faire capitalist society or a socialist society. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. If you want to get like, I had gotten an argument with like a mom influencer one time, because I said that children are a burden. Like, she has said, like, children are a burden. I'm like, children are absolutely a burden. Yeah. I was like, are you fucking on drugs? Like, first off, this woman had like a kid for like 3 weeks. So I was like, spare me your fucking new mom hormones. First off. And second off, I was like, if you don't think that children are a burden, you're on absolute meth. Like, this podcast is a burden. I love doing it. This is fucking fantastic. I enjoy this so much, but it's still like, it is a thing that takes time out of my day that I have to plan and do this. I have to do a lot of stuff I don't like to do the thing I like to do. It is a burden. Kids are worth it, but they're not. It's not like it's a free and easy situation. Like, it takes away from other things in your life. You have to lose your social life, maybe your body for a little while. Like, you definitely, if you're a mom, you're losing some nip. You know what I mean? Your nipples are never going to be the same, right? Like, but it's also one of the most beautiful things in the world. Like, some of the biggest burdens present some of the most beautiful wins in your life. You know what I mean? Like, working, and I said the same thing. Like,
I don't even think it's just some. I think it's most of them. I think it's most of the biggest burdens. It's like, I mean, that's where Jordan Peterson resonated with me, was not even necessarily on the political stuff where, like, yeah, sure, I'll listen to him about that kind of thing. But the personal aspect of, yeah, like, take on responsibility. And like, he worked as like a gateway into those Nietzsche thinkers for me and stuff like that. But like, yeah, man, like, those things are tough. Like, things are burdens, but those are what give your life meaning. Like, sitting on your couch isn't going to bring anybody happiness long term. It's like, yeah, you have to do those shitty things, those things that are hard, but at the end of the day, you can turn around and say it was worth it. And like, for most people in life, that's kids, but like, yeah, that is definitely a burden. And that's where I was like laughing that whole time. I was like, people just get these words where it's like, yeah, like, burden. It's like inherently bad, and it's like, no, it's just it's a weight you carry, essentially. Like, yeah,
I sent her the like, I looked up the definition, because this is one of those things that, like, she's a conservative. She's like, these liberals are changing definitions to words, and I was like, you're changing the definition to a word right now for your own means.
Yeah.
And I sent her the definition. I was like, it's like, literally, a burden is like something to be carried. I'm like, you literally carry a child a lot. So like, that's like, yeah, by definition, by default, it is a burden. She's like, well, that's not the I'm like, well, are we changing meanings? Are we going with the,
yeah.
What are we doing here? It was like, so I love trapping the conservatives in that way. I love giving the conservatives a hard time. The liberals are like, I criticize the left more, but I like picking on the right more.
I learned that it is easier to trigger a right-wing person than it is a left-wing person, I think.
1000%.
Like a general, I think there's nobody easier to trigger than the far left, but the general, like just your average conservative or your average liberal, like again, I don't even pick on the conservatives all that much, but like I did once and like they lost their shit. And I was like, holy fuck. Like, I was like, this is hilarious. I was like, cause you guys are all like some of them are like messaging me being like, oh, you're like, whatever. They get into the fucking culture war shit and send me DMs and stuff. And I'm like, you're saying these things that you are literally crying about right now or in comment sections and DMs and this kind of stuff. And then you're just turning around and doing it the moment that something's directed at you. And it's like, it's fucking bananas to me, the amount of just blindness in humanity in general. It's not even in regards to politics, but just that whole, like, yeah, I really don't, I mean, that's, sorry, not Freud. That's Jung's whole concept on like the shadow self. It's like, yeah, it's like you see what you see in others that you don't like is what you're not willing to admit is in yourself.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, no, it's like, yeah, that's 100%. So it's like, that's the first thing I ask myself whenever people are like getting on my nerves, is being like, am I just getting mad at myself here? Like, and there's definitely times where that's a real thing. And then you have to like parse it out and go like, okay, like how much of this is real frustration or anger towards a situation, or how much is this just like pent up anger inside of me that I haven't dealt with? And it's like,
exactly.
I think that's exactly that. There's a lot of people out there.
I think that conservatives generally on the whole are like immune to self-reflection. Like they really are. And something that a conservative will say, they say this to me all the time. We'll get into like debates, right? And I'll like argue with them and like, oh, well, don't get triggered. And I'm like, if you said it to me, I would slap you in the face if you said it to my face right now. Like that, it makes my blood, it triggers me. It honestly does. Like, don't get triggered. I'm like, I don't know you, first of all. You slid into my DMs. I give you a little bit of time out of my day, and you're going to be here like, oh, well, don't get defensive. And I'm like, dude, what?
You're on offensive.
You anything.
What do you expect me to do?
I don't owe you anything. You came at me. Like, I'm trying to have a discussion with you, and you're saying like, oh, as soon as I like get, poignant in my discussion, you're like, whoa, don't be a snowflake. And I'm like, I guarantee I could beat your ass, dude. Don't call me a snowflake. Like, get out of my face. But but conservatives do that so often, and they drive me crazy. Like, I posted that tweet the other day. I'm sure you saw it, but it was about like, it was kind of drawing the correlate where they're like, teens can't make their own decisions about their gender assignment. And I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. I don't think you're an adult till you're 25 first, personally. And then I'm like, yeah, so we should forgive student loan debt then. And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, they're like, well, you can make that decision when you're 18. I'm like, do you think that people make the decision to go to college when they're a senior in high school? I'm pretty sure they start getting that programming in their head when they're like 13, like, it'll be worth it. Do this other thing. You start looking at college, you start picking out colleges when you're like 15 or 16. You start going on visits when you're 16 or 17. Like, it's a long process of grooming to make that decision happen. So I'm telling you that there's two different groups of people, one that you don't seem to acknowledge and another that you seem to obsess about, that are both being manipulated by powers bigger than themselves. And so you're ignoring that. And then I also never made a bold statement for either one. I just like put it out there as like intentionally ambiguous to see what the fucking conservative coping would happen in my comments about what they thought that I said. And one guy would get on me. I was like, it's not my fault you can't read, dude. Like, I put question marks after everything I said. I never said this is what we should do. And the caption literally said, it makes sense if you don't think about it, which is like our world today. It makes sense as long as you don't think about it too much. And just like the comments I got, I'm like, it's from everywhere. Like, they thought that I said everything that they needed to be pissed off about. I was like, dude, stop with this. And I was like, I have like ideas. Like, I told people, I was like, I think that what we should probably do is forgive the amount of student debt that they've paid in interest, and then cut the interest for the rest of the student debt and pair that with massive college reform that changes this thing. And this also put a cap on interest rates that can be had on student loans, because they're secured by the government. There's no sense in having a 14 or 15% APR on that kind of principle. It doesn't make any sense. And then you essentially have an interest-free loan that you do have to pay off yourself. But a lot of people are only paying interest, so that would help them out a lot. And that would also be geared towards the people who have paid the most interest, which are generally the people that have the less money, that can pay the lower payments. So you're essentially means testing by default by deciding to cancel the amount that they've paid in interest over the time of their loan. That's a different conversation, right? So we're in this thing like, well, are taxpayers going to pay for that? I'm like, actually, I think the banks that gave out those loans should just not get fucking paid. Sorry, you made predatory loans. It was a bad idea. Fuck you. I don't know what to tell you. We bailed you out in 2008. Suck a dick. I don't know. Like I'm pretty sure we could figure that out. That'd be wildly popular, I can imagine. But it's like I didn't say any of those things in the post. It was just like
I'm just in camp. Why the fuck even go to college or university at this point?
well, now, yeah,
like,
that's a trend now. But when we were growing up, when I was growing up, that was like my parents weren't educated, so they wanted me to get an education. They saw that as my path out of what they had. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, like when your parents didn't go to college and weren't educated, that they didn't really, they see that as they see that as the thing. And a lot of times it's projection. And a lot of times it's not true, but
it was.
For a lot of people, it was in their time, in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
No. I think at one point it was generally useful to do. I think now going to university is a net negative.
And
like,
it depends on what you want to do. If you want to go to law school or medical school, shit like that. Yeah, there's
sorry, I shouldn't have been so broad. There's certain obviously industries that you cannot get in without a university degree for sure. In those ones, but again, this is where I still have that disconnect where I go like I could learn all of that knowledge that kid is learning in a university classroom online right now. Like no questions asked. All of that information is actually probably more like recent information on these topics is accessible to me within 2 or 3 clicks. So like at that point you are only paying for the stamp. Like you are literally paying for a piece of parchment paper
and the experience of college too.
The party.
Yeah. I mean, but like also a lot of people I think a lot of people need that transition from living in your parents' house to like kind of living by yourself, but also kind of supervised into like getting an apartment and feeling like there's a lot of things, but you can also do that outside of college too. But if you're marketing tech, if you're like, if it's a business thing, if it's a money-making thing for you, most of the time it doesn't make sense. Like all that stuff is accessible on Udemy or some other, or if you go work, you can get a job at a lot of these tech companies and they pay for education for you. You know, I mean, if you're poor, you can go to work at an Amazon warehouse and they pay for college for you. I think it's like, it's a shitty job, but you can suck the dick for 3 years and like get a degree. You know, it's like you will have no other life besides a soulless job at Amazon in a warehouse and also going to school. But if that's something you need for like upward mobility in your life, like more power to you. I think it works. You know, it's probably better than taking out debt. But it depends on what you're looking. I mean, it's a very individual thing, but I think it gets pressured.
As soon as you take out the debt aspect or the money aspect, that's where like a lot of my views would change on university and college. Where I say net negative, like not necessarily that it's negative through and through, but just like overall what you get out of it for what you put in, whether it's literally 4 years. Like I even just think factor in time into that as well.
Yes.
But like the 4 years you take factored on with the 6-figure debt. Like all of this at the end of the day, is it worth it? So like you scholarship or you're in law or one of those scenarios where like, yeah, it is needed. Like you have to have that piece of paper. Sure. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the culture aspect of moving out of your parents' basement is great as well. But like, I don't know. I know just as many people that went to university that now can't even cook themselves a fucking meal. That I don't know. Like as far as the taking care of your life thing, I'm like, I don't know. I know a lot of people that went to university that can't even take care of themselves. Yeah.
But I feel like for me it was helpful. But generally speaking, I can't speak for anybody else. But like in that way, but I used my degree but the thing was, again, the data, the information I got was outdated.
What did you go to school for?
Health and fitness management, which is basically kinesiology and business combined, which was good. I learned a lot and it was good. And I made a lot of connections. Also, a lot of my friends that are in like concrete and construction now, a lot of those guys, they did a lot of networking in college. They're still doing deals with like our buddies from college and still work with them. So they've made more money because of the relationships they had from school and the fraternity life in particular than they did.
Yeah.
You know, from actually their education in school or anything else. Like that's where so they've probably covered their ass financially, you know, just by the relationships. And I've had that conversation too, where I think if you have the ability to make those relationships without that, great. If you don't, sometimes getting into clubs, frats, sororities, whatever, like that stuff, as silly as it seems, like that's the birthplace of a lot of money for a lot of people. But again, it just depends. Like if you want to go into concrete and engineering management, like stuff like that, you've got to go to school. Like it makes sense. If you're going to be an engineer, like you've got to go to school. Like it's what it is. But with a lot of this stuff, you're absolutely right, man. And I think that's becoming more and more acknowledged in our society, which I think is great. But I also think you should be able to get a bachelor's degree in 2 years. Like that's easy college reform right there. Boom. That cuts your debt in half. To get a basic degree, you don't need racquetball, you don't need fucking underwater basket weaving, whatever the fuck other classes they make you take that cost $1,000 a semester. Like, why? Why do I need to take a kickboxing class? Like, it's just so I can meet we're not in high school. In high school, that makes sense. They have to have a phys ed class and this other shit. But if you're not doing that I had to do it because it was like part of my curriculum and it actually made sense because a lot of our people were teaching those classes after school and it was a great exposure. But generally speaking, you don't need to take racquetball in college. Like, it doesn't make any sense, you know? If you want to, great, but you should be able to get a basic degree in 2 years. It shouldn't be that hard if you go full time. If you just take the classes you need to take.
At this point, we're at the age where I can sign up for a Tuesday beer league racquetball if I need be.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't need to be taught to me at school.
Exactly. Or even chemistry for marketing majors. Why does a marketing major need to take chemistry class or biology? Who fucking cares? You're never going to use it. Stupid. Go away. Leave me alone.
See, I think before even thinking about like college and university reform, it's like you got to go public school. Like public school, I think that is like causing a fuck ton of issues in our society is our public school system. Like, do you know much about the roots of like the public school system, like Prussia, factory schooling and all that?
I mean, it makes sense that it was like it correlates with factory working and obedience in a very similar way, but I don't know all the exact details.
So yeah, a guy named Horace Mann is like dubbed the father of modern schooling, and he went in 1835. He went over to Prussia. And Prussia was like a military state of Germany, essentially. It was like a monarchy state of Germany that was like very into their military power. And they developed a factory schooling system, which was meant to churn out judicious citizens and military and factory workers. And yeah, Horace Mann came back to America and started campaigning on the fact that compulsory schooling was the only way to turn this is actually a direct quote, to turn the unruly American citizens into the unruly American citizens into judicious citizens. And the first paper from the General Education Board, which came out in 1900, which was actually founded by John D. Rockefeller, and the first head of the General Education Board was one of Rockefeller's business advisors. So he just stepped in and was like all of a sudden the education board guy now. But the first sentence in that paragraph on the General Education Board is in our dreams, we will have limitless resources and the people will mold themselves to our the docile people will mold themselves perfectly to will be molded by our hands perfectly or something like that. Sorry, that wasn't direct, but it was like, it's fucking crazy, the origins of the public school system. Now that sounds very conspiratorial, and like I'll take the stance of like the pro for it at that time, but it's like it made sense at that time. 50% of the job market was factory workers. Like the people wanted to move to the cities to get these factory jobs. The schooling needed a way to daycare for the kids essentially. And their idea was, okay, we are going to create a school system to be a daycare for the factory workers. And then we will teach these kids to be the next army of factory workers essentially. And it's like, but you look at now and those jobs account for 9% of the market now. Like, so it's like, we're literally ingraining behavior. Like, dude, in that General Education Board paper, it's called if anybody wants to look it up, it's called The Country School of Tomorrow by the General Education Board. And yeah, it was the first one they ever put out. And they said, yeah, like in it, they're talking about like, we're not going to raise up from among these rural folk, mathematicians, scientists, doctors, lawyers, of which we already have ample supply. Like, we are going to train these people to do perfectly what their parents did imperfectly. Like, those are all like very, I'm not even like exaggerating words there. It might be like slightly paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to verbatim. And it's fucking wild, dude. Like, you read this shit and you're like, this is nuts. Actually, this is a very good book on it. John Gatto, Dumbing Us Down. John Gatto was the the New York State public school teacher of the year in 89, 90, and 91. And he essentially draws out what schooling was meant to be, which was to institute behavior, like essentially get you And I mean, it all makes perfect sense. Like, create an authority figure at the front of the class that is dependent on telling you what you're intellectually worth, essentially. Like, they decide what topics are worth talking about. They decide where in those topics you can be learned. So like, you learn that like a good student waits to be told what to learn, or like these kind of things. And you're like, oh, like, yeah, these behavioral traits are definitely being taught to us at a young age. But now in a world where like we're fast paced towards like general labor work being non-existent. So like, let's teach people how to be creative, think, solve problems. Like, that's the only way that you're going to, like, unless you are outside of the engineering world or like a crazy science. But like the general population, it's like, yeah, if you're not going to be able to problem solve and stuff in the future, like, that's a big issue. For somebody that's, you know, for when we're going to have robots and AI workforce. Like, even fucking, dude, lawyers are going to be out of job. I've got really into the AI like in autonomous stuff. And it's like, it's fucking crazy. It's like, yeah, they're making AI lawyers. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like it, and I mean, you know what, those people will probably, like, I mean, the AI will probably do a better job.
Yeah.
Depending on who's making it. But, but it's like, we need to solve this issue. So like, if we're going to be teaching our kids, spending essentially 13 years ingraining the, like, I mean, even the style of work, like when the breaks happen, like your lunch breaks, your in between class, it's like, this is shift work. This is exactly, and it's like literally modeled off of shift work. So like, let's rethink of our education system from the beginning, because that's where I look at it now. Like, like university and college is like, the enrollments are just plummeting.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if more people are only going to have high school educations, let's make sure that's actually a good education they can use. Because like, what the fuck do you learn in high school, man? Like, I learned shit.
I mean, I
like,
learned more. I worked oil and gas construction. I learned my problem solving abilities, which I'm actually pretty good at. Like, I could, that's one of the things I'm like known for with my friends, is like being able to like fix random shit. But just generally, but it's like, you understand. So me growing up, and this is one thing I want my kids to do. I've talked to I don't have kids yet, but like when we do, we're in that process now. It's like, I learned so much in the oil field because you had a truck full of tools and shit, stuff in the back, like random parts and different stuff. And you would get to a place, you'd be like, I have a problem. Here's a problem here that I did not know was here until I pulled up on this, you know, this oil well or this pipeline or whatever it was. I've got to now fix this problem with what I have, or else I got to drive an hour back into town and drive all the way back. So it's like, okay, well, we may have to make a workaround or do this little thing here and there. Maybe, you know, like little things like one time a guy put, we had cattle out there too that weren't ours, but he would lease the oil rights and lease the property for cattle. And somebody put buffalo out there, and buffalo just walked through fences. So we had to figure out like, what are we going to do now? Because these fences are all torn down because these fucking buffalo don't feel pain apparently and just walk right through them. No big deal. It's like, you got to figure out a way to like, okay, how are we going to like create a system where these fucking things won't come through here again and knock all our shit down, because if the cattle get in here, they can die, you know? So it's like, you have these little, it's like, but I learned more of that than I did in high school, and maybe even through football and stuff like that. And I had some decent teachers along the way, but as an athlete, you can just like, it's very varsity blues. You could kind of do whatever you need to do. But I do remember in college having really good professors. And one of the things, I mean, I don't know if you can pick up on this, but I really love kind of dissecting narrative structures and stories. And it's something I've recently gotten back into, but I loved it growing up, and I really loved poetry. And my favorite college professor, hands down, was a professor of English literature after 1776. So we went through that 1,000-person classroom. He didn't give 100s, but I got a 99 on my final. Like, I loved that class. And he would only call on people that wore hats in class, like people that wore hats in class. So I would always wear a hat to class, and I'd sit in like the fourth row. And I would tutor all my other fraternity brothers, and like a bunch of the sorority girls. We all sat in like the same row in the same area in that class. We had like 20 of us. And I would tutor them breaking down American literature and like symbology and these different things, these like really different correlates, and like, you know, a peach isn't a peach, it's this, you know, like a flower isn't a flower, it's this thing. And like two roads diverging in yellow wood. And if you really look at it, it's not about him actually taking the road less traveled. It's actually about him telling the story that he took the road less traveled, because he gets to create whatever narrative he wants out of this experience, right? Like, there's like all these little fun things you can play with, and I love that shit. But I had a professor that like forced us to think about it and write about it. And he was so fun, and it was never a wrong answer, right? He would challenge you in these different things, and this huge, and I don't know how somebody could manage an auditorium of 1,000 kids and like provide that kind of education. And he had like a leather vest or a denim vest that had said poetry on the back. He was a fucking nerd, but he was just like brilliant, dude. And there was a few of those
like
people
disco's poetry version of Disco Stew.
Exactly, dude. But it was just like, there was something in that. And I think teachers can come in that way, whether it's through work or your family or whatever, but there's that kind of inspired me to like provide my kids with one, like help them let them solve problems themselves and like try and figure it out. And I guess that's something that life in American, privileged world just does not provide you with. Like we don't have that as a culture a lot of times, like just being able to figure something out on your own and like make something work. Like I just decided I'm going to put a new bumper on my 4Runner, and my dad he painted cars forever and did body work and stuff. And I hit him up and I was like, hey, how are your body work skills? Cause he hasn't done that in a while. And he was like, a little rusty. I haven't practiced in a while. And I was like, I'm trying to do this. And I sent him a picture and he was like, does it come with templates? And I was like, yeah. He goes, it's childproof. And I was like, all right, well, I'll FaceTime you. I'll FaceTime you if I fuck it up. And he goes, FaceTime me before you fuck it up. But it's like, hey, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to buy, I can spend $200 on tools and try and do it myself, or I can spend $1,500 to have somebody put on something that costs $1,500. Like it's the same price as the goddamn thing to have it put on, or I can learn a bunch of new skills. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have. Like I didn't know how to do, I have all this camera software and monitors and this other shit. I don't know how to do any of this stuff, dude. Within the first week of learning how to record a podcast, I had to go with my former boss to LA and record a podcast on a Zoom H6 with Jeremy Piven and Jamie Foxx. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Nervous as fuck.
I was freaking out, and it wasn't even good.
Shitting bricks.
I mean, the podcast got recorded, but it wasn't. I knew the mistakes I made, but I just learned how to do it on YouTube. I was like, dude, why are you putting me in this situation? You should hire somebody for this, dude. Like, you weren't even paying me to be here. Like, it was just one of those things. I'm like, all right, I'll try, dude. But if it gets fucked up, like, that's not on me. I'm doing my best here, And I think
if I've got Jeremy Piven and Jamie Foxx in a room, I'm gonna put $500 into hiring somebody that can,
exactly, like rent a studio or something. I don't know. We were like in a restaurant that was closed down. It was weird. It was cool. It was a really cool experience, but it was strange. But I think that's one thing that American culture lacks, is a lot of that like problem solving ability, and just like getting yourself in those situations where like, hey, I got to figure it out. I have just got to figure it out.
I am so grateful for the fact that I like kind of grew up in. So my dad, do you know Kubota tractors?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Okay. So they're the next competitor to John Deere, and like they're actually like right there with John Deere.
Yeah. The Kubota is like the orange and blue. Yeah.
Just orange. Okay. Yeah. From Japan. So actually my grandfather was the first person to sell Kubota outside of Japan. He was the first person to take on an international contract with, so now my dad owns that company, and actually my brother just bought into it as well. And dude, I'm so glad to have like grown up. I didn't take a liking per se to all of that stuff, but I'm glad to have grown up around it. Like even when I was somewhere around the age of 10, like my dad started pushing me towards, it wasn't even like a serious talk or anything. It wasn't like life lectures. I look back at my, like, I want to have conversations with my dad about it now, because like we've never really even talked about it. But there's like, when my first business was a car wash business, he would let me use the pressure washer from his shop. And it was like, yeah, try to get neighborhood cars or like tractors or anything. And I'd put up these posters. And dude, I didn't realize it. I only ever had like 5 customers. I didn't realize it till afterwards. They were all my dad. Like my dad would be like, oh yeah, somebody dropped something off at the shop here for you today. But like, he was like pushing me to do those things and being like, oh, you're not getting any customers. You need to like spread out your flyer zone. You need to like go put a flyer. Yeah. What's the flyer on that side street going to do for you? You got to put that flyer downtown. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like more people, like, and then like 10-year-old me is like, okay, downtown flyers. And then my dad would call me and be like, oh, somebody just dropped something off for you. And I'm like, oh, fucking sick. That flyer worked. And like, so like you get these lessons, but like, I still to this day haven't told him that I've realized that. I don't even know if he'd remember that actually, but, and it's like, yeah, all of those things. And like, he taught me how to like, dude, whenever I was, maybe like 13, 14, he got me to set up a deal with a local farmer who had a cornfield. And I would essentially do like business deals with him. I'd pay him like 50, we would do like 50-50. I'd go up into his field, pick corn. I'd set up a corn stand at the bottom of my street, like sell like corn on the cob by the dozen and all this shit. Like make a deal with the make a deal with the farmer and all this. And I was like, these are the things that like I have realized looking at now where I can operate in the business world without any business degrees or anything like that, where I can have conversations with business owners about literally their numbers and in like back end bottom line numbers and help make sense of it with them. And like I wouldn't have been able to do any of that from my high school education.
No.
Like that was all learned by like hands-on practical shit. And that's where like I do worry about the future, where I'm like, yeah, if we're going to talk about an education system that needs fixing, it's like it's definitely the primary school. Cause I'm like, it's teaching kids nothing. And like,
Yeah.
if I wasn't my dad and I know I told you that I went to school for audio engineering and music production on another time earlier, but it was like that was something I just did kind of like online. I took like a few courses. It was just like a certificate kind of courses through Berkeley in Massachusetts. But it's like those aren't serving me anything right now. Like I like in the music world, they make sense. They helped me, but it's like everything I learned was like from practical means growing up, like hands-on work. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know, that I'm like forever grateful that I grew up in that kind of environment, kind of same thing as you, like what you're saying, like the problem solving abilities of all that.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too. I mean, just looking at that, right? If we draw a correlate as we kind of wrap up here, like, it's like, there's so much of this, like, somebody needs to fix it for me mentality, whereas like your dad was responsible for those cars being dropped off, right? But you had, you still worked for him. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
he was giving you, it was like, he was giving you a little bit of an incentive to keep going, even though like, I really don't want a 10-year-old washing my car. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sprayed out a tractor, but it's like, it's like, I might do it as long as they don't break anything, but it's like, you're not going to make any money doing that. But it's like, you got the incentive, right? It was like, I did that. It was being done like with you and for you, but not you were involved and you were like working for that reward. You know what I mean? And same thing with like, I used to get like,
I was being given things, but I didn't know. Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I thought I was working for things that I was being given. And that's kind of where it was. I mean, I guess I was putting in the time, I was putting in the effort, but it wasn't like real results. But like, yeah, no, exactly what you're saying. Like, yeah, I don't know, man, that stuff is, I'm really scared that that's going to be lost on future generations to come.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things with looking at what we're doing now. It's like, I think what everybody really want, not everybody, but what most people really want is like, people need to be able to have an opportunity, man. Like not everybody got an opportunity to have a parent that would do that. Or like my granddad who raised me, like being able to take me to work and stuff. And, from opening gates as a 6-year-old, 5-year-old kid to like shifting gears in the truck. And I got to do that stuff. Not everybody has that. And not everybody's parents had that much time to spin around, like, which my granddad didn't either, but we've solved that problem by me going to work with him, and like just seeing what it was like. And then as I got older, I got to start doing stuff on my own. And that was a big process for me, but it's not everybody has that. And I think what we really, as a culture and in Western culture, especially, is like, there are unintended consequences of trying to give everybody equal results. But I think if we kind of shift the narrative to like, and this is such a cliche at this point, but like everybody should have an opportunity, right? Like, and that's the thing. Opportunities aren't created equal. I got more opportunities than somebody else based on falling out of the right person and being in the right circumstances, And I could sit here and like create the narrative in my head that, yeah, my parents were drug addicts and all this other stuff, and I was an obese kid and I got bullied and this other, or it could be like, yeah, well, I had people that were there for me, and financially everything turned out to be okay because of socioeconomic shit and global politics and oil being really expensive. And my granddad just happened to be in that world, and things worked out, and I got to go to college and have that paid for, and I got to meet people. And because of X, Y, and Z, I was pretty charismatic and outspoken and extroverted, and that all helped. It's like, I don't think I was like responsible for a lot of that, but there's a few things in there that kind of gave me the tools to be responsible for myself later on, and like be able to look at things through a different lens. And that's something I'm super grateful for, but I wish more people had that. And I know that that's just not the case, and that's just never going to be the reality. But if we start, like you said, in primary schools and elementary schools and high schools, like giving people financial literacy, which I think has an inverse incentive for the college world, which is also dependent on the high school world, right? It's almost like the college lobby would get in the way of teaching people what interest on a $60,000 loan looks like over 30 years. You know, like how much that actually is. Like that, what if somebody explained that to you in a personal finance class in high school? Like that would fundamentally change the way you look at things. And growing up with parents who made money and became wealthy, um, or grandparents rather, that grew up poor, you understand it doesn't matter how much money you end up with, it's if you know what to do with it, right? Like I could given if given me the half of the amount of money they had at a certain time and the same amount of time, I would have 10 times more money than more than what they have now or my grandfather has now because he grew up with absolutely nothing. And all his only focus was, I need to give my family a better life than I had. That's it. At any cost. Did not matter what it was. And that led to some bad decisions and trying to fix things for people. And I learned from that because my aunts were older than me and I got to see that process. I was pretty observant as a kid. But you know, there's a lot of gifts that I really got that a lot of people didn't get. And I think that, man, I think just the society as a general just want people to have a fucking chance. You know, if you decide you want to fucking live in a van or live in a studio apartment for your whole life and play video games and work minimally, like that's cool too. You have I think people should have an opportunity to do that. It doesn't bother me at all. But I think if you want, you know, upward mobility, that's just it's something that it just exists less and less, man. It's a fucking unfortunate reality that we live in, and liberals want to overinflate it, and conservatives don't want to acknowledge it exists, and that's why we end up in this fucking weird middle ground where like I feel like I'm acknowledging reality, but maybe I'm just self-righteous. I don't know.
Yeah, that's my biggest worry, dude. Is just like falling into that self-righteous camp and just getting into my own head about it all, and like that, like something that I'm trying to be like super careful about. But yeah, like no, exactly what you're saying. Where I think to me, it's either the over embellishing or the lack of acknowledging what you were saying there. And that's actually kind of why I got into this commentary thing. Cause like, I didn't plan on it. I didn't think I was ever going to do this sort of thing. I mean, I was a musician, but it was that I made a video about the second time we went into lockdowns. I made a video about mental health during lockdowns. I didn't get into any of the COVID science. I still haven't even got into really the COVID science stuff. I don't talk about it, but I just talk about the logical fallacies with it all. But like, that's what I noticed is missing in the world right now is it's like when I made that first video, I had like people on the left that I've seen like from taking videos from their apartments, like shaming the freedom protesters and this kind of stuff. And then I had messages from the people in those protests. Both of them were like messaging me being like, you nailed this, you hit it on the head. And I'm like, oh, see, this is what it is. You guys just don't know how to fucking talk to one another. Like it's not that dude. You guys are, it's not that we're in this crazy world where you guys can't both have what you want. It's you guys don't know. Literally, it's like a kid crying, and the adults in the room are left trying to figure out what it wants. And it's like now, and you've got these two kids that just won't shut up and tell you what they want. And it's like, hey, use your words. You've got words. You can use them in a good way. You don't have to sit here and fucking cry. Like, yeah, I don't know, but it bothers me. But that's why I kept on with it. Was once all those messages from both sides flooded in, I was like, oh, okay, I see something here. Like it's kind of like, all right, let me see if I can kind of draw the lines between the two. But
well, you're doing good, man. I mean, that's the thing is like you know, I think you're mostly on Instagram. It's like it resonates. And I know it's like that first, like, just to talk about, I know audiences don't matter, but they also do. And I'm sure you've seen some growth, but it's funny how it happens at the increasing rate. And I mean, I worked for like Instagram stuff back when I was doing personal development shit. I've tripled my audience since then, like legitimately in a year and a half. And it was because like this is actually where I was supposed to be. Like I'm a bullshit caller. Like that's what I do. I called bullshit on personal development. That was my personal development style whenever I was coaching people. Wasn't like, you know, manifestation and fucking fairy tales bullshit. It was like practical to the point. Like people that came to me were like, it's like, hey, I want to make a huge change in my life. Like I want to quit my job. Or I worked with somebody for over a year because he wanted to divorce his wife in the most like loving way possible and like be the best for his kids and get himself like emotionally ready for that toil that was he knew his wife was going to be fucking livid and like go after him. And she was that kind of person. And they had 5 kids and they've been married for 20 something years. And it was like a whole thing. I married super young. And it's like, that's kind of people I worked with. And a lot of times it was because I would call bullshit on a lot of the personal development stuff that I thought was, you know, spiritual bypassing or just egocentric or just bullshit in general. And so all that kind of translated so much easier into politics. And I say like, one of the things that's funny about the difference in politics and personal development is that politics, as dark as it is, isn't as dark as a personal development world. it's still people taking advantage of people that like think that they're victims and trying to juice them for everything they're worth. And it's super fucked up and crazy. And there's some great people in it. Don't get me wrong. I have some friends, and if anybody ever wants to like get into that kind of stuff, I can get into it. But some of it, man, it's weird, it's crazy, and it's like you see these same correlations no matter what it is. When there's some kind of charismatic leader who does a thing, it just all goes to shit so fast. But it's good to have you out here, man, and it's been fun to like the people I've met through like you and Will and Mir Odom and these other guys that we've all got this little crew here of sharing each other's stuffs around. And it's fun to see what other people think about things, and we can like shoot the shit. And even though we're all like a little bit different in the way we do it, I think it also just kind of makes it better. And there's our little social media ecosystem.
Yeah, dude, it's been fun. Dude, again, like that's such a big point about it too. Is just like, dude, even I met my girl, like you, I met my girlfriend doing this. Like, I mean, we knew each other from like years back. We just hadn't talked in like 3 years. And like, just through this stuff, we just started like chatting about the world, and saw that we like saw eye to eye on like literally like the roots of reality, like the very like deep philosophical talks we've got into and stuff. And it's like, yeah, if I wasn't doing this, like her and I wouldn't be talking right now. And it's like, if I didn't do this, it was like you and I wouldn't be talking. Like I wouldn't be, Will, all of these people. So it's like, it's real cool to essentially like, build that community sense. And that's where like I thought I was going to polarize myself and like essentially put myself into a loner box, but it's only been building. So thanks, man. No, I really
appreciate that. Well, hey man, everybody go follow Liam Out Loud on Instagram. Anywhere else people can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube as well. I actually used to do like long forum rants. I mean, right now I'm just kind of like crushing out like minute like roasts and stuff. Like it's literally more, it's like half comedic, half political. Like it's like, I can't even say it's that political. But
it's fun. It is very fun though.
Oh, thank you, man. But yeah, no, I want to get into it in the future, but I've got a lot of long videos on Instagram, like in that 5 to 15 minute range, where like I really dove into topics and like I could actually break them down and give my opinions on them. So if anybody wants to watch those, they're probably a little bit more intellectually satisfying, more mature than the reels. There's definitely still a lot of immaturity in there, but
I mean, you got to have a healthy amount of irreverence in anything you do. That's my experience anyways, but I'm not Jordan Peterson. So
yeah.
All right, brother, thank you so much for doing this, give me so much time. Hey, my goal, I think, as this is the first interview of Thought Criminals, because we got this whole new thing going. I don't know if you'll be the first one that drops, but you're in there in the first few. I think 2 hours is the good time. I think 2 hours gives you enough time to air it out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I didn't even realize it's been 2 hours. That's cool. But yeah, man, I mean, even as a listener too, like this is the thing, is like people will say like, okay, get the 30-minute podcast or the 2 hour podcast or 3 hour podcast or what is it? And it's like, this is what I noticed with, say, for instance, for YouTube analytics, past the 5 minute mark, everything is the same. Like if you can grab somebody's attention, like, you know what I mean? Like you're losing everybody's attention in the first 5 minutes. If they stay after that, they stay. Yeah. Like, so it's like, to me, whether something's an hour or 2 hours, like if it's a good if somebody's listened to something for an hour, they'll listen to it for 2. It's so like, actually crazy stat, like most listeners decide whether they're going to hit next to a song within 7 seconds on Spotify is the average. So
I believe that.
It's like you have this like little finite space, and it's like it's a little bit longer with like conversational podcast stuff, but it's like it's once you get over that hump. So like 2 hours, I think is great, because I mean, as a listener, I don't like 30-minute podcasts. I feel like people have to rush through every topic. You hardly get to know the person, all that kind of stuff. So,
and we went all over the map. So for all of these, those of you, see, I can't talk now. I cut off at 2 hours. My brain stops working. For all of you out there that listen to the whole thing, man, appreciate you. We'll see y'all next time.